What's going on, everybody? Super excited. It's Monday. It's not just any Monday. It's the first day of my spring break. I am off all week, and I couldn't be more excited. I needed this week off. It was getting bad there for a minute. So this is going to be a terrific week for me. Now, a lot of things that I want to cover with you guys today. You know, if you go back a week, one of the things I said to everybody was, or I asked, I should say, is I asked one or two or three cards that you think are going to go up the most over the next 20, 25 years, and which cards do you think are going to go down the most over 20 to 25 years? And you know, a lot of people chimed in with some really, really interesting responses. In fact, I would say there were more really good responses this week that I really wanted to share than maybe any week that I've done this. I narrowed it to 6 that I'm going to be sharing with you here in just a minute. And you know, there are always going to be some people that are like, Greg, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about, you know, the values because I collect because I love cards. And I respect that. I do respect that, but I think we do still care about values. Even the people who don't want to admit that they care about values, they care about values because a lot of the people who don't say that they care about values are always talking about how cheap that they bought stuff and how long ago they bought it. And, you know, I bought that card for $100. It's going for $1,000 now. Look at that. And it's like, you know, I think that we care. It's very similar to housing. You know, when I bought my house, I did not buy my house thinking, I'm going to buy this house because it's going to go up in value, right? I just bought the house because it's met the needs of what I was looking for in the housing market for my family. And then as you hear that it's going up in value, you go, oh, that's nice. Right? You want it to go up in value. You didn't buy it to go up in value, but you want it to go up in value because that certainly can't hurt your total net wealth. And I think it's similar to cards because, you know, just like with a house, if you thought that something was going to go down in value, you wouldn't go buy it right now. You would wait until it went down. If I was certain that the housing market was going to go down over the next 6 months, I wouldn't buy a house today. I would rent a house until 6 months from now when the prices are lower, and then I would buy the house because I would save myself a lot of money. So the people who say they don't care about prices, they don't care about values, well, I think that you would hit pause on holding out from buying a card if you thought it was about to be a lot less expensive. Why would you want to buy it today if it's going to be a lot less in 6 months? So I do think that buying cards that we think are on their way up, not their way down, is something that we all consider. Now, before we get deeper into the suggestions that you made, all made, the picks that you all made, I have a couple cards I want to share with you. First, Mike sent me this. I did the video the other day, and I featured some clips from Mr. Mint, Al Rosen. And so he sent me this card, which he said Mr. Mint gave him when he sold some things to Mr. Mint a long time ago. So that was super cool. If you haven't seen that video, the video goes between talking about some clips from Mr. Mint and then also Marshall Fogel. I thought it was a really interesting one as I was digging through a lot of the old footage. Then also he sent me some Greg Nettles stuff. I love Greg Nettles stuff. You guys know that. Especially the Greg Nettles cards where he's in a Yankee uniform, like that 84 Flair. And then my guy Mark sent me some cool stuff. He sent me this nice George Kittle. Love George Kittle. Love all my 49ers, but George Kittle is one of the best. And then this cool Christian McCaffrey. Love that. And then a Clemens card. I'm always down for a Clemens card. So thank you so much to Mark. And then my friend David. David sent me a really cool card. 33 Gaudy Archie Vaughn. And included in it, he sent me this article that talked about how Archie Vaughn is one of the most underappreciated Hall of Famers of all time. And it really went into, there are a lot of people, we know their names, we know what they're famous for, we know how good they were, but Archie Vaughn was really, really good, and not a lot of people know much about him. So I really enjoyed that article, and I loved the card. And when texting with him, he even mentioned something I didn't know, I didn't realize, and that this is the only 33 Gaudy with an orange background. So love that card from my buddy David. So let's go ahead and get into your picks, your responses on 2 cards, 3 cards that you think are going to go up in value over the next couple of decades, and the ones you think are going to go down the most. Let's check them out. The 2 cards I think will go up the most in value, the 1952 Topps Willie Mays, arguably the greatest all-around player ever and oldest living Hall of Famer. From the first flagship Topps set, not counting 1951, and most iconic set ever. Also the 1993 Topps Finest Refractor Barry Bonds. Hall of Fame or not, love him or hate him, he will always be in the hobby conversation as the man who broke the game of baseball. The set that essentially started limited parallels and the modern shiny craze. A beacon of scarcity in the midst of a sea of cardboard. Cards that I think will go down the most in value? My answer here is not any specific cards, but rather all sorts of cards for which people have spent a lot of money to acquire, but they are primarily holding on to as investments or speculations because their heart is not really into them. I don't know enough about the modern card market to give great examples, but I know they are out there. Okay. I mean, some really, really interesting picks here, really great picks. Let's start with the 52 Topps Mays. Now, it makes perfect sense to me. I always thought that nationally everybody was like Willie Mays is the greatest. Willie Mays is one of, if not the best player all around of all time. And then recently some people are like, man, you just think that because you live in California. And I'm like, Is that true? I thought it was everywhere. I still think it's everywhere. Tell me what you think. But I mean, Willie Mays, 5-tool guy, had the speed, had the defense, had the arm, had the power, had the average. I mean, he did everything. His home run totals are at the very top. His Gold Gloves, his highlights. You watch his defensive highlights. The guy was unbelievable. And I do think that special sets, important sets, have a special place in the hobby, and people are always drawn to them. And the 52 Topps set is as important, obviously. It's as special, it's as sought after, it's as recognizable as any set ever. So I think that that's a really good pick for the 52 Topps Willie Mays. And then the 93 Finest Refractor Barry Bonds, which is such an interesting pick. If you have watched my buddies, his channel, Vintage Sanctuary, great channel. He's always showing off his different pickups, his collection. I love it. I'll put a link down in the description below to his channel. He's a vintage guy, right? Mostly vintage. Does some modern cards of vintage era players as well. But I wouldn't have guessed he would have said a 93 Finest Barry Bonds refractor. But the explanation as to why makes a fair amount of sense to me. I mean, whether we like Barry Bonds or hate Barry Bonds, everybody knows Barry Bonds. He's got the name recognition, right? He's got the highlights. There's all the video of him. But the set itself, like I was just mentioning about the 52 Topps, it's a very important set because it's really when a lot of the sparkle, flashy, refractor thing really started taking off. It's just like why the 52 mantle is important, because that changed cards, right? That set changed things moving forward, and its mantle. And it's like the 89 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. not only is it a great picture, not only is it a great player and a likable player, in his case, a likable player, but it's a set that changed everything. If you were collecting then, it went from these kind of matte finish, cardboardy cards that were low quality, just kind of slapped out there and put in cases and put on pallets, to these high quality cards with high quality gloss, high quality picture, high quality manufacturing, had the hologram on them. It was a game changer for cards. And that's one of the reasons I think that the 89 Ken Griffey Jr. card is so famous. So I think that the thought process of why Bonds' refractor from this Topps Finest set, it does make some sense. Now, will it go up? I don't know. I've heard more people over the last year talk about Bonds cards potentially having long-term value than I heard for years before that combined. It's an interesting choice, and I thought it was worthy of sharing because there are some valid arguments to it. And then the things that are going to go down, I think it's really well said here. It's not about a particular player or a particular set or a particular refractor or a particular series. It's about the cards that people are buying and holding, not because they like the card, but because they think that it has investment value. That's so important, because if we think about things like, why is the 54 Hank Aaron so popular? Well, it's so popular because he's an all-time great, and it's a beautiful card, and people want to have it, and they want to hold it. They're not looking to flip it. Same with the 52 Mantle, right? Same with the 55 Clemente or the 55 Sandy Koufax or the 57 Frank Robinson or Brooks Robinson or 59 Bob Gibson. They're all beautiful cards. And they're cards that people want to have, to hold, to keep, to be in their collection. Whenever people start buying things to flip, to hold and sell as soon as there's money to be made, as soon as there's meat on the bone, those cards have a certain amount of doom potential to them. I think that you don't need to identify a particular player. It's just, in general, cards that people are buying not to enjoy, but to sell to someone else. The hot potato syndrome. Any card that's a hot potato probably doesn't have a lot of long-term value.
Greatest increase? I have no clue, so I'm going to answer it as what should increase the most. Number one, the 1949 Bowman and 1949 Leaf Larry Doby rookie cards. He was the Jackie Robinson of the American League, taking just as much verbal abuse and discrimination in those ballparks, and now with a microscopic amount of the fanfare in comparison. Number two, the 1958 Curt Flood rookie card. He was a player who sacrificed the second half of his career to fight for players' rights. The fact that every other major sports league banded together with Congress to petition for his enshrinement in Cooperstown for his contribution to all of the sports, and the Baseball Hall of Fame ignored it, completely is nothing short of a criminal injustice. Greatest decrease? The 2011 Topps Update Mike Trout PSA 10. There are just too many of them, and he is going to fall short of the total career milestones that most baseball cards fans obsess over. Sure, his peak was amazing and gets him easily into the Hall of Fame on the first ballot, but his career totals will pale in comparison to the biggest legends. Outside of that, I would say nearly every big prospect card from every sport. It seems like these cards transact at amounts that are insane, as they only have room to go down unless the player ends up in the GOAT conversations.
So a lot of you write really thorough, well thought out responses and explanations, but week after week after week, John, my guy John from 3D 80s Kid, continues to be as well written as any comments that I receive. It's always well written, great explanation to why he's saying, what he believes. And this is no exception. And I'm actually excited because I'm having John, I'm going to be doing a collaboration with John and my guy Chris from Missouri. We're going to record it this week, and that should post this weekend. So I'm excited to talk more to John about even this specific topic and his reasoning for these particular cards in our conversation that we're going to do here in just a few days before this weekend. So keep an eye out for that this coming weekend. But I think that he absolutely had outstanding picks, and his reasons for his picks make so much sense. Now, first, Larry Doby. Larry Doby is one of these guys that if I asked, if I was at a dinner party and I went around the table and asked 10 people, do you know who Larry Doby is? I'm guessing maybe 1 out of 10 would know who that was. Just not baseball collectors, not huge baseball fans, just your regular adult on the street. 1 out of 10, I think, would say, oh yeah, Larry Doby, didn't he play baseball? But if you said Jackie Robinson, everyone would know who Jackie Robinson was, right? Now, Larry Doby entered the league. It's not like it was years after Jackie Robinson entered the league. It was weeks. It was like Larry Doby was going to be entered into the American League, and the Dodgers just got Jackie Robinson in first. I mean, it was almost Larry Doby that was the guy that broke the color barrier. And as John mentions, it's really, really interesting because he dealt with the same abuse. I mean, we've read the articles, we've seen the movie Jackie Robinson, where you can see the way he was treated by people in the stands and how his, even other players on the field. And Larry Doby dealt with the same stuff, right? He dealt with the same stuff. He did it in the American League. And this is at a time also where the American League and the National League were a little bit more separate. I mean, now we've got, the interleague playing, and we all kind of think of it as one now. This was a little bit of a different time when they were a little bit more separate than they are now. So it was a very big deal. And I do think as we move forward, the social awareness of Larry Doby is probably going to be on the rise, because how could it not be? Because there's so little social awareness of his contributions right now. So I think that's a really, really good pick. Let me talk about Curt Flood for a second, right? So Curt Flood is another great pick for similar reasons, right? What he did for others. The negativity he took on himself for others. See, there are a lot of people in this world who say, oh yeah, I care about others. I want to do the right thing. I want to do what's right for others. But then when it actually comes time to do it, then it's like, well, there's always like kind of an excuse, right? Not always, but for a lot of people. And then there are some people who are really genuinely willing to take on other people's grief for, the benefit of the greater good. And that's what happened with Curt Flood. As influential on the game of baseball and where the players are right now of anyone. And I've mentioned him on the channel a couple of times. My dad has said for a while, Curt Flood's the guy that, does not get the appreciation he should, not just for the social things he did and the business things he did with athletes, but was a really good player. It's not like he was a guy that was going to get cut because he wasn't any good, and then he took on this greater cause. So back to the Mike Trout as the downside. I don't follow modern stuff very much. I think that they're good looking cards. I think that they, or they're cool to look at. I don't have many. I have some. I don't have many, and if we go back 5 years ago, I think the trajectory that Mike Trout was on was an unbelievable trajectory, to the point where people would have said, he's an all-time great. Like a guy, if you were to pick your all-time starting lineup, he might be in it. But because of, some of his issues with injuries, he's had back issues, he's had a whole bunch of different issues and stuff, that trajectory has changed. It is no longer on the same trajectory, but his name sometimes is still associated with being on that trajectory. And when his cards were just absolutely out of control 3 or 4 years ago, you would have thought that there would be a massive correction. Now, there has been a correction, as there has been in just about all, modern cards. But if you look at like a Kevin Durant rookie card, a Kevin Durant rookie card is down like 98% of where it was from during the pandemic. In the last, since, 2001, 2002 to now, 2-3 years later, it's down like over 95%. A Mike Trout card is down, but it's not down nearly to that level. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out with Trout. His name is still an elite name. And who knows? I mean, if he comes in this season and he's healthy and he just gets back on track with how he was, then maybe his cards will, start to shoot up again. But it doesn't seem like the correction of Trout cards is the same as what the correction has been on some of the other players. And his cards have more than just the correction of the market. They have also the fact that his trajectory of his legacy is not accelerating at the same rate that it once was.
Pre-war centered good condition Hall of Fame cards more than anything else. They are getting harder and harder to find. Collectors that do have them are not really letting go. There are literally a ton of post-war and Topps cards available out there at shows and eBay.
Okay, so now bear with me for a second because you're going to be like, Greg, where are you going? So just this last week, there was a video that came out and the news hit that the, Wemby 1/1 black finite, whatever was pulled, right? It's pulled from a pack, sent into PSA, and it received a 10, right? And if you look at the card, it's clearly off center, like at least 60-40 off center, 65-35, but it got a 10. Now, this comment was obviously about vintage cards, pre-war especially. And I'm talking about Wemby. Well, the reason I'm talking about Wemby is if even now, with the technology that we have, we're still getting cards that are being cut off center, that are having issue with quality control. Imagine going to pre-war cards. Imagine going to an 1887 Allen and Ginter set, right? Like 135 years ago. Or a 1910 card from the T206 set, 115 years ago. The technology then, compared to now, is just light years apart. Not to mention that the cards were not put in boxes to protect them or even designed with any sort of quality paper at all. They were put in packs of tobacco, right? You put them in a pack of cigarettes and you pull out the one card, a soft pack of cigarettes. You pull out the one card and there's your card. And it's 115 years ago. And the quality control at the time was awful. So to find a pre-war card that is well-centered is very rare. And this is in an era where Wemby cards are being off-center, right? So if the quality control back then was awful, if the quality of the products being used was awful, And here we are 115 years later in that case. We could talk about, a 34 Gaudi Lou Gehrig or something as well. But the quality control was terrible. And if the quality control was terrible, then just think of how many cards are off center. So if we're talking about rarity, right, we're talking about scarcity, because the whole reason that people care about the population report is to know how rare something is, right? How rare is a PSA 7 of this card? Well, let's look at the pop report. And when you look up the card in PSA's database, it'll say how many there are of that grade and how many are higher of all the other grades combined. Basically, to give you an idea of how rare it is to have one that nice. The reason, because that affects the values. We know this. We know that the values are affected by how rare something is. That's the whole reason that this 101 card is supposed to be amazing, is because there's only one of them. That's the theory, right? So if we even talk about commons from the 33 Gaudi set, if we even talk about, a Hall of Famer from the T206 set, and it's centered, even if it has a crease, it's 115 years old. So even if it has a crease, even if it has severely rounded corners, even if it has a stain on the back of it, to find one that's centered is not something that is going to happen very frequently. A very small percentage of cards being centered. So I think the point here is terrific in this comment, but it's not just because centered is nicer to look at, right? Because centered is nicer to look at, let's face it. A card that's 90-10 versus a card that's 50-50, it is more pleasant looking at the 50-50 card. So there's going to be more demand for the 50-50 card because it's more pleasant to look at. But if you add on top of that it's extremely rare to find a pre-war card that is 50-50 centering, and then you add on top of that, most people that are buying those aren't buying those to speculate, like the point we made a second ago about cards that people are buying just to turn, just to flip, just to keep it moving. That's not what they're doing. The people that are collecting, the Vic Willis T206 card, they're not doing that because they're looking to flip it 2 weeks later. They're doing it because they enjoy it. They enjoy the history of it. They enjoy adding it to their collection, and they're going to hold it. So they don't come up very often either. So yeah, pre-war cards and pre-war cards that are centered and Hall of Famers that are pre-war cards that are centered, they just don't come up very often. And when they do, people are willing to pay up for them. I think that that's an excellent choice.
In percentage terms, second-year cards of all-time grades might go up the most. Let's say 1960 Bob Gibson and 1964 Pete Rose as examples. Dropping most would be ultra-modern rookie cards. Let's say the Doncic and Williamson base prism.
I've talked about second-year cards a few times. A lot of people have talked about second-year cards for a while, and people continue to go back to, well, everyone wants the rookie card, not the second-year card. I definitely agree wanting a rookie card instead of a second-year card. The rookie card is definitely the preference. But let's just say, for example, you really want to have a great Roberto Clemente card. Okay, you've decided Roberto Clemente is the guy that you want to collect, and you want to get a really nice one. Okay, you go into the National wanting to get a Roberto Clemente card, and you've got $500 in your pocket. You cannot buy a Roberto Clemente rookie card for $500. A one is pushing $1,000. I mean, obviously things change and stuff, but A 2 is definitely $1,000. You might be able to buy a 1 for a little under $1,000, but that is out of the price range for most people. Again, we're in this Facebook world right now. And the Facebook world is people just show off their best times. If you go on Facebook, you're going to see people on their vacation to Hawaii. You're going to see them showing the flowers that their husband gave them for Valentine's Day. You're going to see their child holding up a trophy at a soccer tournament. That's what you're going to see. You're not going to see video of them arguing with their spouse in their bedroom. You're not going to see them screaming at each other about finances. And to a certain extent, when we talk about this whole YouTube world, right, and collecting cards in this YouTube space, and let's face it, if you're watching this video, you watch some YouTube videos on cards. And if you look around for very long, what you'll quickly see is a lot of people showing off a lot of really great eye candy, right? And one of the reasons that the only thing I do, a lot of people, their channel is just showing cards, and looking at cards is great. It's great. But the problem I have is that there are a lot of us that are in different places with our collecting. So if you're just seeing me show off my eye candy, and that's all I ever did, then you're just watching. You're not participating, right? We want to participate in the hobby. And, if you're an art student, you don't just go to museums, right? You don't just go to museums. You actually participate in art. And a lot of us might go to some of these channels and see some incredible cards and some incredible collections. And that is fun to look at. But what I try to do here is I try to make it inclusive of everyone. And the way you do that is I talk about strategies. I talk about thoughts. I talk about, centering versus non-centering. I talk about vintage versus, modern, pre-war versus post-war, 70s versus 80s. Why do I do that? I do that because we can all participate in that. If you're a collector of Brooklyn Dodgers cards, then centering is something that you think about. What grade to collect is something to think about. Those are things. What year, is 57 better than 54? It's something that you can participate in. But if you're just watching me show cards, right? You're just watching me show cards, then that's fun. But for a lot of us, we're not participating. We're just observing. And I think most of us are in this hobby to participate. Now, can I confess something to you all right now? I'm going to confess something to you all right now. I don't even remember what the question was. What in the heck was the question? The question was second year cards. Good grief. So if you want to have a great Roberto Clemente card, right? And you can't afford the rookie card, what do you think you're going to go after? You're probably going to think about the second year card. So just like when the 51 and 52 mantles got really expensive, then the 53 got really expensive. Now there's a 54 Bowman, but some people aren't into the 54 Bowmans. Maybe they're not into Bowmans. So those people go, well, then they go to the 56. And now the 56 is getting to where that one in a low grade is at 1,000. And then what do you think is going to happen next? It'll be the 57. And there's this domino effect of the prices from high to low, because once one hits a stratosphere that a lot of us can't participate in, the next one goes up. So when you look at a guy like a Bob Gibson, to buy a nice copy, just a nice copy of his rookie card, you're looking at $500. And for a lot of people, that's not realistic. That might be your entire year's budget. But the 60 is insanely affordable. You could buy a nice copy of the 60 for under $100. So yeah, I definitely think that some of these guys, some of their cards, as the rookie cards hit a stratosphere above where we can participate, the next best thing is usually the second year card. So I think second year cards certainly have a lot of upside.
Cards to go up. Number one, the 2014 Topps Update Mookie Betts. Maybe not so much the base cards, but the parallels. Although 2014 update print run was lower due to the hobby not perceiving any marquee rookies at the time. Masahiro Tanaka was the only cover at 25 years old, which says it all. He actually can be argued for here as well because in hindsight, Tanaka had a short but very impressive career. But Mookie is a generational five-tool talent and the rare player who transitions to the infield later in his career. First base not counting, obviously. He is also a crazy good bowler. I'm talking 300 games many times. He's PBA good. He may not be the next Pete Weber, but I wouldn't be surprised if he has a second pro career in the PBA after the MLB. Number two, the 1958 Topps Veda Pinson. If he makes the Hall, and I think he deserves it, that card explodes. The sharp, raw copies you can find cheap now, any given day, would evaporate overnight. Him just missing the Big Red Machine years hurts a bit. I think an untimely death in 1995 hurts also because he hasn't been in the public eye like so many other former greats have been, which helped fuel their Hall of Fame induction support. He's kind of just forgotten, I think. But if he eked out another 243 hits, he's in the Hall decades ago. Cards to go down. Number one, the 1989 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. Iconic or not, I just don't understand how the most graded card of all time can appreciate much more. Number two, the 86-87 Fleer Michael Jordan. It's not even his rookie card in my opinion. Overpriced due to the boom, and there are way more copies out there than people realize. Even more unopened out there than people realize.
All right. So a wide variety here. We got some modern stuff, some 80s stuff. We've got, 50s, 60s stuff. Well, in this case, a 58. So such a question that shows off the diversity of collecting by this individual, right? So let's just start first by talking about Mookie Betts. Now, Mookie Betts is as versatile of a player as I even remember. I remember one time as a kid back in the 80s watching a Cardinals game, and somebody I'm sure will correct me if I'm wrong. And I think it was Jose Oquendo. And Jose Oquendo, during the course of a 9-inning game, played every position. He may not have pitched. I can't remember if he pitched or not. He even took an inning as catcher. And he literally went all the way around the diamond. And that versatility is rare. We live in a world right now where there's specialization. Everybody specializes in one thing. Even kids growing up. It's like they have to get in competitive sports and pick a sport pretty young. There aren't the kids like when I was younger, when my dad's generation was younger, people played every sport. They played multiple sports, 3 sport athletes. That is so rare now. People specialize. And I mean, it just came out, I think, last week that they're talking about moving Mookie Betts now to shortstop. I mean, when was the last time an outfielder became a shortstop? That's wild. That shows off his athleticism and his versatility. My concern with any modern cards is there are so many different variations, parallels, brands. I don't even know which one you would want to collect, or how do you know which one to target? So if you want, whether it be a Shohei Ohtani or whether it be, a Mike Trout or a Mookie Betts or a Clayton Kershaw, it's like There's so many of them. I mean, how many rookie cards does Wembanyama have? Tons. So how do you even know which one to go after? That's the part that worries me about anything modern, is if you go after one, well, that might not be the best one. I mean, even Tom Brady has tons of different rookie cards, right? And there ended up being like one or two, which are like the best ones. How do you know what the best one is going to be? So that's my issue with that. Now, as far as Veda Pinson goes, whenever you have a player that isn't in the Hall of Fame, but might make the Hall of Fame, like a Veda Pinson, there is going to be a price surge if they make it, right? When Minnie Minoso made the Hall of Fame not that long ago, when Gil Hodges made the Hall of Fame not that long ago, I'm not talking about like guys that haven't been on the ballot yet, like an Ichiro or a CC Sabathia. Well, I'm talking about a guy that's been on the ballot, Veterans Committee or whatever they call it now. Those guys make the Hall and it's like a surprise. There is absolutely a spike in values. So, and this is going to kind of play into my question for this episode, which I'll share here in a few more minutes at the end of the video. But if Veda Pinson, and it's like so many Hall of Famers, it is based on certain numbers, right? It's like almost everyone with 400 home runs is in, everyone with 500, unless you were associated with, PEDs or whatever, are in. 300 wins, 3,000 strikeouts. There's those different levels, 3,000 hits that kind of make you get in. And as he mentioned, Veda Pinson was just a few hits away, right, from being in. So will he get in? I don't know. But if he gets in, just like, when we were talking about Kurt Floyd earlier, a Kurt Floyd rookie card is super cheap. A Veda Pinson rookie card is super cheap. And ironically, they're from the same set, the 58 top set, right? But if they were to get in, those cards would go way up. Why would they go way up? Well, there are a lot of Hall of Fame collectors. There's a lot of Hall of Fame run collectors. And all of those people who don't have a Veda Pinson rookie card would need a Veda Pinson rookie card because they would need to add it to their run. And now that people, instead of are more set collecting, they're kind of player collecting or Hall of Fame run collecting, then there's definitely going to be a jump in players' cards values and demand if they make the Hall of Fame. So then, conversely, we look at, well, what cards are kind of bought out? There's so much demand, but there's also so much supply. And those are the two that he says he thinks are going to go down. And that's the Ken Griffey Jr. Upper Deck and the Fleer Michael Jordan. And I think that there could certainly be truth to this. I mean, by far, the most graded card in the history of PSA is the Ken Griffey Jr. Upper Deck card. And I want to say that the second most graded card is also a Ken Griffey Jr. card. They're still opening packs of 89 Upper Deck. They're still opening packs of 86, 87 Fleer basketball. They're not opening a bunch of packs of 33 Goudies, right? Or 51 Bowmans. Those aren't really being opened. The supply is kind of fixed at this point, but the supply is still changing on those. If you remember back a few years, and some of you are going to go, oh my gosh, what is he even talking about? But there was a show on TV, on MTV, called MTV Cribs. And what it was is it was different celebrities, different musicians, recording artists and stuff. And what they would do is they would show a tour of their house. And you would go through their house and they'd show you all their cars and they'd show you their pool and, their billiards room and all this kind of stuff. And it kind of became a tradition after a while as a status symbol that they would go to their fridge, they would open the fridge, and they'd have a bottle of Cristal, which is an expensive champagne. It's not even the most expensive champagne, but it's an expensive champagne. And it was almost just like a thing for the show. It was like a status symbol thing. If you are a basketball card collector, the bottle of Cristal is the 86-87 Jordan rookie card. No doubt about it. It is the status symbol. Yeah, I got a Jordan. Like, what's in your collection? Well, you have every serious basketball card collector wants a Jordan in their collection. And that's one of the things that I think is kind of propping up that particular card. If you even go to a card like a Ken Griffey Jr., that is a lot of nostalgia buys because it's not crazy expensive. So the nostalgia buyers, even people that aren't really into cards but did collect cards as a kid, they still kind of want to have a Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card. So I think that the nostalgia and the status symbol of those two cards is kind of propping up the values. Will that go away? I don't know. This particular person certainly thinks that it's going to go away. But we'll see. And it's certainly, whenever there's a card that is high supply and high price, it's always risky for a price crash because all it takes is a small change in demand for the price to take a pretty big hit.
The cards that should go up are the multiple Hall of Fame player cards. Example, Aaron Mantle, Mays and Musial, Snyder and Mays and Mantle, etc. The only reason I can come up with that multiple Hall of Fame player cards aren't in more demand is the individual stats of the players aren't on the back. For me, multiple Hall of Fame player cards are high on my list to collect.
There is no doubt about it that the best way to accumulate cards of some of the all-time great players is to not get their base card. It might not even be to get their all-star card. It's to get the multiplayer cards. There are some really, really great player cards out there that are multiple players. I mean, one of the best off the top of my head is the 62 Topps Manager's Dream card. It's got a great picture of Mantle and Mays. I mean, an absolutely beautiful card. There are cards that have Mantle and Aaron on it. There are cards that have Mays and Musial on it. There Richie Ashburn and Willie Mays. And these cards are super affordable compared to the players' base cards. So as people are trying to collect on a budget and they want to participate in the hobby, but they want to have some cards of the big name guys, I think that this is a really savvy way to go about accumulating them. Also, it feels to me like people have continued to move slowly away from set collecting, and there's a lot of reasons why I think that's happened. Now, are there still some set collectors? Of course. But it used to be everybody was a set collector. And we've kind of moved away from that a little bit. And as people have moved away from that, what people have tended to go towards are things like player runs. If you are a Willie Mays player run person, after you've collected all of the base cards, after you've collected all of the all-star cards, then you start looking at some of the other things. You start thinking about like the multiplayer cards. You start thinking about the team cards. Because if you look at the PSA Registry Master set, if the card has a player on it, it's in the player run. So I think that there are a lot of people that have moved to player runs that are starting to get to the point in their collection where now they've got to continue the run and they're continuing them with some of those types of cards. I don't understand why, some of these multiplayer cards are as affordable as they are. It makes absolutely no sense to me. And I absolutely think they have a lot of upside over the long haul. Now, for this week's question, kind of going back to the Veda Pinson choice. and even the Curt Flood choice. The thing about Curt Flood and the thing about Veda Pinson is they're not Hall of Famers yet. They might become Hall of Famers. If they become Hall of Famers, the prices of their cards are certainly going to take a jump, again, because of all the Hall of Fame collectors that are out there. And also the recognizability of their name and things like that. Them being in the news for the Hall of Fame, all of that will add to the demand. So my question is, if we were going to kind of speculate and go, well, if we could get some of these players before they make the Hall of Fame, right? Thinking that the demand for their cards will go up and the prices will go up. If you were to just kind of because I mean, when you speculate about a modern player, like a Soto, you go, oh, well, in Yankee Stadium, Soto's going to have a monster year, so I'm going to buy up a bunch of Soto cards. And that's how you speculate, right? But when we talk about vintage cards, these guys' careers are over. And some of them, they're not even with us physically anymore, right? They've passed away. So the only way you can really speculate when it comes to vintage cards is something noteworthy going to happen with that particular player? You know, why will they suddenly get hot and their demand increase? And what would cause a player's demand to increase of a vintage card, of a guy who played 75 years ago and is no longer living? Well, one thing would be making the Hall of Fame. So my question for this week is, who are a couple of players, vintage era players, that are not currently in the Hall of Fame, but you think will eventually make the Hall of Fame? Who are the players not in now, but you expect to be in at some point? Because if somebody wanted to speculate in vintage, and I'm not suggesting that you should, I think you should collect what you like. And if you like Veda Pinson and Curt Flood, then you should go buy Veda Pinson and Curt Flood. I'm never going to be a person who suggests speculating in the world of sports cards. I think you should be buying the things that you enjoy owning long term. But who's not in the Hall of Fame that you think will get in?